afternoon, everyone. And I just want to check whether everybody can hear me. Welcome to this webinar this afternoon, and we're talking about change. And if you can hear me, hi Renee, can you hear me? Great, welcome Renee. Hi guys. Sounds like you can hear me. If you can hear me, while we are waiting for other people, in the chat, can you answer this question? Today we are talking about my staff are used to the old ways. How do I get them to change? So we're talking about insights and tips on how to get buy-in from your employees or key stakeholders. And here's the question for me. Sorry. Why do people resist change? Welcome, Adelaide. I just want to hear from you. Can you type in the chat box? Why do you think people resist change? Based on your observation. Hello, Michelle. Let's just think together. Why do people resist change? Hello, Sarah. Thank you. Yes, people resist change as a result of fear of the unknown. Absolutely, they're fearful. Great. What else? What else is still there? Yes, checked in. Okay, so one of the things I'm going to ask you is that you use the chats. No desire to change. Say more, Sarah. What do you mean by that? There's no desire to change. What makes them not to have desire to change? So I would like us to use, if you have any questions, to use the question button. They're content with the way things are. So there's comfort. There's no reason for them to change. They're in a place of comfort. Okay, I'm back. Great. Much better. Okay, great. Great. Thanks, Renee. So we can start. So all the reasons that you guys have said in terms of why do people resist change, they are all correct. And we're going to go into that. And I want to share some with you that we need to explore and think about. And the first one is employees resist change because they don't know why the change is needed. I'm comfortable where I am. Things are working. Why are you rocking the boat? So that's the first one. If people don't know why we are changing, then they don't see the reason why they need to change. Sometimes there's a specific resistance to the change that is being made. Maybe they just don't like a particular process or something that's being introduced. So one has to sit down and understand what is it in that change that they are not agreeing with. Because sometimes they know best because they are the ones that are doing the job. Sometimes people are tired of change, especially now during this COVID. I mean, this is a change on steroids. So imagine that we have to change our social lives. We have to change work, the way we work. We have to change almost everything, the way we travel. Everything has to change. I think everybody in the world is exhausted with change at the moment. And most of us have not been on holiday, actually, since the lockdown. So we are change fatigue. So imagine that in your business, now you are also trying to change the gear. You're trying to introduce new things. And people are like, we've had enough. This is enough. This I cannot do. So sometimes change fatigue can create a resistance. The other one is fear, like you said. Change is unknown. And people tend to link change to their previous experience, whether that change was personal or that change was actually at work in terms of how the change was managed. The other one is lack of support from management or leadership. Sometimes management and leadership, because they get it, because they understand it, because it makes sense to them, they assume that it's going to make sense to everyone else. That logic doesn't go all the way unless you really, really spend time to think about it and talk to people about it and share with them so that you bring them at the same level as you are. Sometimes leadership and management just assume that people are just going to change. And the fact that people have been complaining about something and now you introduce that change, you assume that, oh, because they were complaining about that particular issue, now that you've changed it, they should be happy and they should accept change. But individuals and psychology doesn't work like that. So it's very complex. There are a lot of dynamics that one has to work with. So those are the kind of things we need to think about. So thank you very much for checking in, and let's move on to the next thing. So what am I going to share with you today? I'm going to talk about insights, my observations, my learnings, which I've already started, and offer something to you in terms of what you can do, and then give you an opportunity for questions and reflections and comments. One of the things about change, and I think all of us knows about this, that change is messy. It's very, very hard. Even the change that we want. You know you are not happy in your current house, for an example, and you need a better house or a bigger house, and you move to that bigger house, and guess what? Things are not going to be as exciting initially as you thought they will be. So change at the beginning is very hard, and it gets messier in the middle. And at the end, as you're now settling into that beautiful house, then you start to enjoy. You enjoy the swimming pool, you enjoy sitting in the garden, but getting there takes some time, and it's not an easy process. So I think one of the things we have to accept about change, that change is not easy. And hence we need to have empathy as leaders. We need to have a certain come from place. So one of the things I thought about was to summarize or to pull some of the beatitudes for leading change that I think are going to help us. So one of them, let me just see whether I can extend this. Oh, it's not happening. So the first one is understanding, being able to understand where people are coming from and how they're responding to change. Curiosity is basically trying to understand. The example I gave, people were unhappy with a particular process. That process has been changed. Now they're still unhappy. Why? So staying curious about what's going on. Sounds like we've got double curiosity. And actually, coincidentally, curiosity is something that really we need to amplify when we work with change. Because as I said, behavior and the psychology and the dynamics of behavior and psychology, sometimes we don't understand people. So curiosity, really, it's a cap. We need 2 or 3 of those caps to wear when we are leading change. The other one is empathy, being able to stand into people's shoes and understand how does it feel like for them to be going through this change. Patience, it takes time. To communicate the same message maybe 6 times, I think research shows that it takes about 6 times for a message to actually sink in, for people to get it. So which means that you have to use different ways of communicating to people. Patience is required. Decisiveness as well. Because if you as a leader or business owner who's driving this change, you don't seem to have a backbone. People think that you're not decisive or you haven't bought to the change yourself. How can they change? How can they buy into the change if you not showing that actually this is what you want and this is going to work? Another one is humor. Without humor, you will lose your mind. And, you'll have so many gray hairs. So we have to laugh at ourselves. We have to bring lightness to the situation because some of the things sometimes are actually quite funny. Self-awareness as a leader. What are your strengths? What are the areas where you're not strong, where you can pull someone else who can supplement or complement you? For an example, you're not good or great with patience. I'm not good with patience. So I make sure that when I work, I've got someone else who's more patient than me, who can slow me down because I'm rushing. I want us to get to the end. There's results to be achieved. So it helps me when I've got someone who keeps saying to me, Ntsiki, let's listen a bit more. Presence and visibility. This is one of the biggest mistakes that the leaders and business owners do, is that when you've communicated the change, you then pull back. You assume, I've told them, they should know. And when people have got questions and they've got issues around the change, they want to see you. And you are not there, you're running, doing other things. So yes, you're a business owner, you are wearing many hats. The question is, how do you manage your time and make sure that you say to people on Mondays at 8 o'clock, if you have questions around the change, we all meet around the coffee table and have coffee. So that they know every Monday you are available to them to ask the question, answer the questions, and for them to ask the questions. So that's very important. So I've put those 4 elements here because I wanted to share with you a case study with a client of mine whom I'm working with at the moment, where there's a lot of issues around lack of trust from management saying, why should we say to them they're doing well? Because then they're going to think that's all they need to do. And then they'll forget and they'll sit on their laurels. So that's one of the things. The other one is, why should we give them a platform for them to speak, because we know that in the past, they haven't used that platform. So there's a lack of trust, which is linked to sometimes the contempt and being stuck in the past. So sometimes leaders and managers can resist to the change themselves because they're feeling, but this is how these people have responded before. This is what they've done. They're not performing. They're not meeting. So they hold the score. And that also can impact on people buying into your change, into the change. I've spoken about the insufficient support from the sponsor when the sponsor has launched the project and disappeared and sees that for him, it's not a big deal. We mustn't make a big fuss out of this thing. That's a big word I normally hear a lot. We mustn't make a big fuss around this. It is a fuss because it's change and it is about people. And that is linked around the lack of understanding what it takes to change people and what it takes to move people forward. So here's the thing that I wanted to show you in terms why it is a fuss. It's because if you look at this is a picture that I'm showing you for big projects where we have leadership, and then we've got project team, and then we've got frontline employees. For you, probably this picture looks like this, where there's just you and your people. So look at that gap. So that's why it is important that you realize that change is a process. It doesn't happen overnight. It needs patience. This is where you are in terms of the current state, the transition in terms of people testing and getting used to it, then the future where you want to be. Most of the time, leaders and business owners, their focus is on the future. The focus of the workers is actually on today, on day to day. So that on its own, that different focus creates a gap in terms of how we are experiencing this change and what we need from this change. So this becomes quite very important. So here's what I want to share with you is one of the things that you can do. This is a tool that I use to manage change. It's a ProSci tool. I've used so many tools over the years, but I find the ADKA ProSci quite simple and approachable, and people can recall it because it's easy. It's ADKA. It's about awareness. It's about building the awareness, establishing very clearly to people, why are we changing? What is our North Star? Where are we going? What is our destination? That is very important. It goes back to that point I made earlier on. People resist because they don't know why we're changing. And also sometimes people, the leaders, they're not clear about if I don't change, as Ntsiki, when my manager is telling me that I need to change, what are the consequences for me to change? And that's very important because you mustn't use that as punitive, because sometimes leaders can use to threaten, to get people along, then people are going to resist more. What I mean is when I know that if I do not change, and that is communicated in a way that is helpful for me, then I can understand it, because we are being left behind as a business. The second one, which is very difficult, is desire to change. This one is, what is it in for me? And sometimes say, yes, employees are very selfish. They're always looking for something for benefit. All of us do. And if you're honest, you as a leader, as a business owner, you will change when you are very clear about what is it in for you. If your wife, your husband, your partner wants to change something in the house, in your life, you want to know, how am I going to benefit in all of this? How is going to improve my life? That's a normal reaction. So we need to be very clear with that. The third one is what knowledge and support you're going to provide for them. So as an employee, I want to know if this is the change you want me to make, what provision are you making? The third one is how are you going to ensure that I'm able to apply my knowledge? You know, or what do I need else? Because for an example, if you introduce a computer or an app or something like that, it's easy to train people on the system. But then people might need an attitude or a behavior or coaching for them to actually now apply that knowledge. And sometimes there's a gap between the knowledge and the ability. And that's where things go wrong. The last one, which is very important, is reinforcing. And I think going back to my example I was making, my client is very reluctant to appreciate the employees. It doesn't matter how well people are doing. They keep noting what people are not doing. And unfortunately, there's a saying that says, and I hope I get it right, you know, where attention goes, there goes the energy. So if your attention is the place where people are not doing well, then the energy for your team and for you is going to be around the things that are not going well. So which means that the things that are doing well are not going to get the focus. And those are the things that you need in order to be able to change things around. If you look at positive psychology, focus on what's working and build on that, because that builds the momentum for change. So I think I'm just going to go through this very quickly. Is the other thing you need to think about is sometimes we are not realistic in terms of the adjustment we want from people. So we always have to be conscious. The bigger the jump, the bigger the resistance. So we always have to be conscious that the bigger the jump, the bigger the resistance. And sometimes the resistance, it's not a negative thing. We are resistant because we don't have information. We are resistant because we don't have enough skill. We are resistant because we've given enough skill, but we don't know how to apply our skills. We are resistant because we are doing so well. Yes, we are not perfect yet, but there are things that we are doing well, but you are busy looking at the negative things. So those are the things that we need to look at when resistance comes up. The other one that is nice about using ADCA, because it's such an individual-based approach, is that as you are changing your business, you must also keep in mind that the individuals within your business, they're going through their own leaps and bounds. So people do not change at the same time. So don't compare Susan to Joseph or Joseph to Maria, because they are changing at the different time. But if Susan is an early adopter, is the one who changes quickly, you can use Susan to change Joseph. So those are the kind of things that you can do as a leader. So in conclusion, be clear about on what is changing so that people know what's changing, what's not changing, what will happen if our business doesn't change. And eventually, if people are not changing, the consequences of not changing needs to be communicated. And very factually, you don't have to threaten people for them to change, because if people are not going to change, they are not going to change. And that's where you need to make a decision as a business owner, whether do you separate ways, what do you do? So those are some of the decisiveness and decisions that you might have to come to. The other one that's very important is, what will success look like? That is very important. The other one is understanding the readiness of your business. Can your business take this? Can it change the gear? Can you change the gear, you personally, your people, including your family? The more you're away from your family, what are the consequences? So those are the kind of things you need to do. Even the ADCA, you can use it to your family. So you're going to be working longer hours now. What do you need to do to bring your family on board, giving them, explaining to them the North Star, where you're going, helping them, what's in it for them? If they support you to be working longer hours, how long will this take? So those things are very important. What do you need as a leader to drive this? What are your strengths? What are your challenges? And what support do you need as a leader? Do you need someone to coach you? Does your business need a coach? Does your team need a coach? And take your team through some form of a formal process that is similar to the one that I've just shared with you. Because if you've got a system and a process that you're following that's a bit structured, it's easier for you to know what you're doing. Okay. Any questions or reflections? You can use the question button. You've got question already. The question is, how do we avoid infecting our staff with our own resistance and doubt? So there are two things that comes to my mind. The first one is, if you are doubting the change, do you really need to do the change as the business? Because if you yourself are doubting it, it's going to be difficult for that change to succeed. The second thing that comes to my mind is, if you're still doubting it, but you really, really feel that this change has to happen, and you yourself maybe are going through your own difficulties in terms of change, there's nothing that beats vulnerability. And I think the research that is coming out now in terms of change throughout this COVID-19, particularly with leaders, the most thing that is coming out very strongly is vulnerability. And also, what's the other word? Being congruent. You know, I mean, one of the world leaders that is being used at the moment as the role model is the New Zealand a prime minister. I just keep forgetting her name. In terms of, she is real in her leadership. So, for an example, one question was asked to her that when New Zealand was told that they are COVID-free, what did you do? And she said, I did a little dance. So sometimes leaders don't want to reveal themselves and they don't want to show up. So I would say there are two things you need to ask. If I don't believe in this change, should I really be leading it? If I feel that really my business needs it, then how could I also show up and be real during this change so that I can support my staff? Because the more the staff they see that you are also struggling, they are able to say, okay, this is normal. And you are able to be empathic to yourself and to them. You already won the battle. So you've already built partnership. I am struggling to get my staff excited about a change in the way we do things. What is the best way to get them excited? I think, Renee, what I would like to hear a bit more is, what have you done so far to get them excited? And why are you struggling? What is it when you say you are struggling, what is it that is making it difficult for you to get your staff to be excited? So while Renee is still answering that, I'll look at some of the questions that came up in the last session. I think some of them I've already answered them. The one was, I think it was, yes, it's similar to what Renee is saying. What is the best way to get your staff excited about the new processes? So I think maybe let me answer, Renee, because I don't think maybe you can hear me. So I'm struggling to get my staff excited. And the other one is, how do I get them excited about the new ways of doing things? I think one for me is going back to what I spoke about earlier on, and I think I'm going to go back there to that slide. I think it's this first slide. You need to establish the reasons very clearly. Why are you changing? And the second one is the second part, is that what is in it for them? That gets people excited. When people understand how this thing is going to work, they get excited. So I'll give you an example. We selected a number of young and up-and-coming people for the project I'm working on, and we call them, it's change agents. These are your early adopters, people who are already excited about the change. Now, the thing we're asking them is that they play a role to be the change agents. We call them the influencers. So number one, we made their role to be relevant. So everybody wants to be an influencer who is young. So we call them influencers. So they got even excited to play this role. The second one was, this is what's in it for them. So what's in it for them is that I become visible amongst my peers. I stand up. The second one was, you learn to be a leader as a change agent. You learn to interact with management and leaders. And these are young and up and coming individuals. That's in it for them. It's about their career. So they are helping us to get the buy-in from their fellow employees, but they're getting something out of them, out of the process. So it gets them excited. So the more you are clear about what's in it for you, it becomes quite exciting for people, because then they said, now I'm much clearer about what's in it for me. Sometimes it could be your personality. So think about, sometimes if you're an introvert, really you are not the person who is quite easy in engaging, who's not easy with patience, who is not outgoing. Some of these roles can be quite exhausting, and you might struggle in getting people quite excited. The other one, you need to be excited yourself about the change. If you are not excited, how can you get people excited? So those are the kind of things you can think about. So the other one that was asked last time was, what if the staff pretends to understand, not to understand the situation, but you know that they are doing this for themselves and not really for the business? This is very similar to my client, the one I was talking to you about. There's always this lack of trust, not trusting the intention of the employees. So there's us and them. So that is fundamental. It's going to be difficult for you to drive change if you do not trust your people. So you need to think, when I ask, is your business ready for change? Is it ready to change gear? If the environment itself, there's a lack of trust, people don't trust each other, they're not going to trust you. And you're not going to trust them. And that's going to be difficult. So first thing first, you need to address the environment that is existing, the climate that is in your business right now. What is the culture? How do you work as a team together? We are working from home and the company is paying for their internet connection. However, the production has gone down. That's a very, very real question, Renee. And this is one of the things that most of the organization, big and small, are struggling with at the moment. How do we manage production? How do we micromanage? We don't micromanage. How do we keep in touch with our employees? So, and it's very difficult sometimes to manage, because people can say, my network is down, we are load shedding. So there's a lot of issues that people can put in place. And I think it goes down to trust again. And when I read that, Renee, my first thing went back into these behaviors, to understand and be curious. What's going on? What's happening at the moment? What I'm noticing, there's two differences that I've observed in my clients. There's a client that I work with. Before they start any meeting, they spend 30 minutes, literally 30 minutes, checking in, proper check-in, everybody, sharing about where they are, how they are. I remember one time the leader was showing us a picture that she received from her sister or somebody, a picture of the Vic Falls, in terms of how the Vic Falls in Zimbabwe has filled up. You know, someone was sharing something in that 30 minutes. What that does, it builds the relationship. People start to see one another, not just about work. What I'm realizing with some of my clients, number one, they never show any face. So people don't show, it's always voice, so we never see each other. So people are speaking in black voice, in black boxes. That's number one. And number two, people don't even check in. It's, hi, how are you? Yeah, we're fine. And then we go into the agenda and that's it. And I've seen the difference in productivity between the clients that actually do spend time checking in and the clients that actually is just about work and there is no contact and building that relationship and still staying connected. So I would say, Renee, I would be curious about what's going on. But one of the things I would do is to look at the health of the relationship. How much time are you spending just talking about getting to know each other and where people are at? Because if you don't know, or you don't care about how I feel, what's happening in my life, why should I care about your project? And this is what happens with employees. And they don't do this because they don't care about the business. It's a psychological thing. It's what's in it for me. You are asking me to meet you halfway, support your project. But can you do one little thing just to see me and recognize me? So that's basically that. And that's where we miss it, is these little things as leaders that we miss that makes that creates the magic. I think that's it. I'm trying to check some of my questions again. How do I know? How do I do now? What do I do now with my staff? I'm just a small catering company. I don't know how to do this psychological stuff. I mean, that's a question that came up last time, and it's such an honest question. And I think for me, because that question is so honest, that's exactly where you start, is honesty. Goes to what I said earlier on vulnerability, being able to share with your employees. Guys, this is not easy for me. And I understand it's not easy for you too. And also pick one thing. That self-awareness is very important, because that's what that question is also reflecting. I know I'm not good with the psychology stuff, so I need help. Or I choose one thing that I think is going to make a difference with my employees, and I just focus on that. And I ask them to hold me accountable. So one of the things, probably, I'm just making an example, your struggle is to be present and be visible during the change, is to say to them, one of the things I want to do is that I know I'm running around because everything right now relies on me. But I want to make a commitment once a week to spend time with you. Please hold me accountable. And that's one of the things you can do. I'm not sure whether there are any other questions. So Candice D is asking, I don't have staff, but I do have a business partner. I find myself exhausted being the driver of the business. We are in the events and service industry. How do I help shift his mindset? Beautiful. A very good question, Candice. So one of the things is to look at your partnership, the agreement that you have. So one of the things that you could do is to have what we call honest and open conversation. And having that honest and open conversation, but with clear, what I called B attitudes as well, which I'm showing you now. And not all of, I mean, these are not the only attitudes you have. These are just some of the attitudes I've chosen. So one of the things in having that difficult conversation with your partner is to say, what is going to be our B attitude as we are having this conversation? Because we need to have a very, it might come to a place where it's tough and where we disagree, but I think it needs to be honest so that we can be able to drive our business successfully. We need this conversation so that we succeed in our business. So you go back, Candice, into your ADKA again. The awareness is that we need to have a conversation about how we are working at the moment. We need to have a conversation about our roles and how we are splitting our roles. What's in it for you is that you have a less grumpier partner, and we are much more clear about how we're working together. And actually, if we manage to do this in a better way, we might actually be able to work more effectively, which means we might be able to score more clients. Because so those are the things that needs to be said. And then the next question is, how are we gonna be as we having this conversation? So that's your B attitude. One of the things is we're gonna stay curious. What do we mean by being curious? So as you can see, as I'm talking, all of this needs effort. Relationships, people need effort. To have a conversation with somebody, set up the structure up front. You will realize that you might spend a lot of time talking about how we're going to have this conversation. What if we disagree? How are we going to be when we disagree with one another? What can I hold you accountable for in terms of what we've agreed now? It takes a lot of time, and you'll find that by the time you get to the conversation, it's quicker because you've agreed about how you're going to have that conversation. So then the next part would be, these are the things that needs to change. So you agree, both of you, for us to go forward, to work effectively as business partners, these are the things that needs to change. Then you need to go through the ADCA again. You know, are we clear about where we want to go? And everybody's clear about what's in it for them. Does your partner need some form of training or something? Let's say he or she doesn't know certain things that you are doing. Do you need to transfer skills to him and train him in those areas and coach him? And how you're going to help him, you know, when he is doing well? So that's why I like ADCA, because it's very simple. It really gives you an idea that as a leader, I need to raise awareness. I need to create desire. I need to check whether the person needs skills, they need training, or I need to transfer skills. Do I need to coach them? And how do I reinforce them? And how do they stay on course? And I know it still means that you have to have an effort to change that person and into their change process. But what's in it for you is that, yes, in the short term, it's going to take your time and your effort. But in the longer term, you've got a better relationship with your partner and a business that's working effectively and probably more profitable because it's working effectively. I'm going to take one last question and then we're going to close. One last question while I'm skimming through these questions from the last session. So one of the questions that came up was the question around why do people resist change? And one of the things that we spoke about in terms of that awareness is the willingness to be transparent. To be transparent about where your business is with your employees. And sometimes this becomes a very sensitive topic because you get sensitive as a business owner to think, if I show people my financials, they're going to say, oh my gosh, is that how much we are making a month? And you pay us this little? And sometimes that might happen. However, in most cases where I've seen it, especially if your financials are really clear and you can show the expenses, you can educate them in terms of how business work, because you can't spend all the money, and show them how it works and what's going on, why you need to have or make the changes that you need to make. It closes the gap between you and your employees, because they stand to align to say, now we understand why this business has to operate this way. For an example, people might look at the bank balance and think, oh, we've got a lot of money and we're being paid this money. But when you start to explain to them that, guys, the way the business works is that I have to keep so much money in the bank so that in the next 3 months, at least we have this, and I can pay this and I can pay that. So the money you see there has got, it's been spoken for. So people tend to understand. So it means that in 3 months, we might be out of business. So, and it kicks people into action. So one of these questions was, I have actually shared the information with my people, but I still find them not to be supportive. So the question is why? Why you've shared this? And I think if I recall what we started talking about, I was saying to the person, look for your early adopters. If there are people that are hearing you, that if you've been transparent and you're very clear about why we're changing, what needs to change, what's not changing, and people are still resisting, I'm sure there's 1 or 2 people that are supporting the change. Those are early adopters. Use those people. Sometimes you can ask them to communicate their understanding of why the business needs to change. And a peer hearing another peer is like, oh, if Joseph gets it, okay, now I understand it. Because remember, it takes 6 times for the message to actually sink in and for people to hear why we're changing, why we need to change, what's in it for me. It takes a bit of time for people to assimilate that message. So I think I'm going to leave it there and just say thank you very much for joining us this afternoon. And we've really enjoyed the questions. I'm going to hand over to Rike, or it's me who gets off the... Okay.